I think we're going to get started here. I'll start out with the formal introduction. Cindy Cashman is an author, an international speaker. Cindy credits a lot of her success to learning to listen, trust, and act on her intuition regardless of what anybody else tells her. Cindy has sold over 1 million of her own books under different pseudonyms. In 1988, she and her co-owner started a publishing company called Newport House, Inc., with $3,000. In less than 3 years, they had sold over 500,000 copies of their first book, Everything Men Know About Women, written under the pseudonym Dr. Alan Francis. By 1995, they had published 10 of their own books, selling over 1 million copies out of their garage. They then sold the rights to their books to Andrews McNeil Publishing. Her Life Lessons series, Life Lessons for Couples, Life Lessons for Mothers, and Life Lessons for Women, are available in over 10 countries in 7 languages under the pseudonym Cindy Francis. Her website is www.cindycashman.com. And now for my personal introduction. I had the opportunity to meet Cindy for the first time at the Spiritual Marketing Super Summit in Austin in January. She was speaking on the topic of intuition. Cindy's proven through her own success just how powerful intuition can be, and one of the tools she shared in her talk, which stuck with me, was an easy way to tap into your intuition through questions. I started asking myself questions that weekend and was amazed at how a simple shift like that can make such a huge difference. I started asking things like, how can I, rather than I need to. If you haven't already subscribed to her Question of the Week, I invite you to do so. You definitely won't regret it. I am grateful for the opportunity to get to know and work with her, and I'm honored to introduce you to Cindy Cashman. Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you.
So we're going to start out with the very first question, which is quite a loaded question, and that is, what is the single most valuable lesson you've learned about abundance, and what makes that so valuable for you?
First of all, that's a great question, Velma, and it is a powerful one. I would say that the single most important lesson that I've learned about abundance and why it's so valuable to me, actually there's a couple things. The first one I would say would be the gratitude attitude, which is in all things give thanks no matter what. I was very fortunate back in the early 80s to learn from a man named Foster Hibbert, and he really talked a lot about this. I had heard about it before, but you know how we meet people in our life and they just make us understand what we already knew at a much deeper level. In 1979, I was in a car accident. The doctors said I would never do sports again. I was in a neck support for 6 months. And I had a choice to make. I could make a choice at the time to say, oh, poor me, and I'll never do this again, or I could make a choice and choose to find something good about it. And I chose to just every night give thanks for it. I'd go to bed and say, thank you, thank you, thank you, this is wonderful, because what it is, we really don't know what the universe has in store for us. We are all here to learn lessons. And oftentimes we judge things way before the matter. So it was during that time, and again, the taxi picked me up every day, took me to physical therapy and to the chiropractor. And I went to one doctor, and when he said I'd never do sports again, I looked at him and I said, well, I'm a positive person, and I'm going to go to a doctor who believes I can get better. And fired that doctor and went to another one. And it did take, I was in treatment probably, I've got permanent damage, so I've never fully recovered. But I am glad to say that after about 7 years, I was back to doing absolutely every single sport I had done previous to that accident. So by saying thank you, thank you, thank you in all things, it helps you find what is good about the situation. And what was good about it, there were actually a number of good things about it. A lot of people do not realize that when I graduated from high school, I was only at a 2nd and 3rd grade reading level. And when I was in a neck brace, I knew I had had a hard time reading, and I made a choice. I have never really watched TV my whole life. I've been pretty much a pretty big jock. I absolutely love the outdoors. I'm involved in a lot of activities. I barefoot water ski. I fly upside down in airplanes. I go motorcycling, everything. Almost every sport there is I've done. Well, I've always knew I had a hard time reading. So when I was in this neck support thing, I thought, well, this is a good opportunity for me to go get some help. So I went to a friend of mine who was a certified Minnesota school teacher. Her name is Sunny, and I said, Sunny, will you test me? I know I can't read. I got F's in reading in 3rd grade. And she tested me, and this is at age 22, and it was at that time that I was diagnosed, or that I found out that I was only at a 2nd and 3rd grade reading level. I think it was a 2nd grade reading and a 3rd grade decoding or something like that. I've got the official paperwork in my file system. And within 6 months' time, she took me from a 3rd grade reading level to a 7th grade reading level. Now, I have not been able to share that story until recently because, number one, I was so ashamed of it. And number two, I found out that when I did come forth to share it, it was very difficult. But also by sharing it, it gave a lot of people hope because they had no idea. And people said to me, well, how could you have graduated from high school? And the funny thing is I graduated with almost all B's. The reason why is I was like a number one female or like a number one football player or a star football player. They pass them from grade to grade because they're such a good athlete. I was the number one female athlete from my school. I was the first one to go to state competition, first woman ever to go from my school to go to state competition in diving. I broke almost every pool record I dove at. And those were just a few of the reasons why they continued to pass me from grade to grade. So during this time, I finally got to learn to read. And isn't it funny that here my, quote, claim to fame is my books. And for anybody that really looks at any of my books, they will find that they are really all very simple. They're all extremely simple. How much simpler can you get than a blank book? It's a profound message in its simpler form. But that's just, Everything Men Know About Women was just really a fun book. My life lessons for women, mothers, and couples are a lot more inspirational. They're one-liners, and they're very powerful.
Great. Wow. That was a lot of sharing. I never knew most of that stuff, and I really do appreciate you sharing all of that. I spent the last little while reading through your book, As a Woman Thinketh, and I also read through Recipes of the Soul and thoroughly enjoyed them. Some of the things that stood out for me, first of all, with respect to As a Woman Thinketh, your very first page says something that pretty much sums a lot of that up, and I would appreciate you speaking just a little bit more on it. I'll read it to you. A woman's mind is the power source by which she creates her reality. She is perfectly joined as one with her mind, thoughts, and feelings, and therefore experiences them to be either a source of joy or pain. When she thinks and feels in private, what she thinks and feels in private will surely come to pass, and the outer world around her is her mirror reflecting back. Can you say a little bit more about that? It actually spoke quite clearly to me, but I thought maybe we could speak a little more on it.
Well, for any of you who have read As a Man Thinketh, the biggest difference between As a Man Thinketh and As a Woman Thinketh is I added one real powerful word, and that's feelings. Because to me, it's the feelings of having that creates. You can say affirmations all day long, and you can think things all day long, but until you add the feeling, the emotional feelings behind it, that's what generates the power that creates them. So one of the things I do is I teach women, or I teach really anybody, mostly women, how they can take a belief system that's no longer serving them and replace it with one that is serving them. So you always have a choice in life. There's always two ways you can look at things, either good or bad. And I don't like to judge anything as either good or bad because we don't know whether it's good or bad. It is what it is. So you can have the choice to think positive about it or negative about it. And I think depending on what your thoughts are, that's going to depend on how you feel. You follow what I'm saying? So if your thoughts are saying, oh, poor me, or poor me, you're going to feel bad. But if your thoughts are thinking, this is wonderful, this is a blessing in disguise, I'm looking forward to unexpected opportunities, I'm just so excited, I don't know what's going to happen because of this, but what an awesome opportunity to feel this experience. There's a big difference there.
Mhm. So what you're saying is when you take what is and find a way to feel about it that feels good, you're actually opening up more doors for things to come to you that are good.
Absolutely. There's a law out there called the law of attraction, and you can only attract that which you are. And so the more feeling you have about attraction and energy that you send out, that's the energy that comes back. I love a story that Zig Ziglar said that I heard years ago. You take a magnifying glass and you move it all over the place, nothing's going to happen. But if you focus it, you can get a rip-roaring fire. And by putting feelings and emotions behind your goals or whatever it is you want, that's the energy that's going to be the fuel that helps moves it forward.
Right. Actually, one of the things you did say in here is each individual thought and feeling contains a creative energy that manifests its likeness. The more attention and focus they are given, the more intense the creative energy becomes, and the more quickly physical manifestations result.
Absolutely. In fact, I keep a miracle journal. I have miracles happen so quickly, it even surprises me. I can share some of them. It's to some people that I have a hard time relating to it, but I love to meditate. I spend time in silence quite a bit. And when I'm in silence, I will project a thought. And by projecting that thought, for example, it was, let me see, I think the first week of December 1999. So we are talking about 3 weeks away from the millennium. So step 1 is I'm meditating. Step 2, I ask a question. And step 3, I listen. The question was, where am I supposed to go, or what am I supposed to do for this millennium? I had nothing planned for the big millennium. Within 1 hour, my phone rang. And on the other end was a person that I just met, I think, a few months ago, and they said to me that we have a free 2-week round trip, everything paid for the British Virgin Islands, private captain, private chef, with 8 people. 1 person backed out, you can have it for free.
That's manifesting.
Yeah. and I the part 3 was to listen. Now, why did that call come 1 hour after I had asked the question? And I said, well, you guys just met me. Why? And they said, well, we could tell from your personality you can get along with anybody, that this is already all paid for. This has been paid for actually years in advance. They took care of this trip. I went and I just had a total blast. And then when that call came in, it's so easy to go into the doubt, this is too good to be true, or fall into that that sometimes self-talk that we can find ourselves falling into. And so oftentimes I will go back into my room where I meditate, and I'll say, what happens if I go? And then I pick up the feelings from the feedback from my body, the feelings that I pick up. And in this case, I went and I had an absolutely great time. In fact, another time, I was meditating and I wanted to find a place to go have clothes made. I absolutely hate shopping. I don't like shopping. I find it's very difficult. I'm petite. Almost everything I buy, it has to be altered. And so I sat down and I wrote out a full page as if I already had it, a whole line of custom-made clothes. And I said, a friend of a friend will introduce me to somebody that will help make this happen. And as I'm meditating on this full-page goal that I wrote, I mentioned it to my friend later that day. This is a Monday. I mentioned it to her. She says, I know the perfect person for you. She told me the person's name. By that Thursday, we're talking about 3 days later, that lady flew in and spent the day with me. And I said, I don't know when this is going to happen, because I put down that we would travel someplace really fun and exciting, and in exchange of her helping me design clothes and finding clothes right for me and stuff like that, that I would pay all her expenses. So she would have a fun trip out of this. And I said, I don't know when we'll go. I know it's going to happen. I just didn't know the timing. Well, I think a few months later, I get an email. And this email is for like $999 for 12 days, airfare, hotel, breakfast, and tours in Thailand. Now, my first thought is this is too good to be true. And so I called the company, and they said, you can't pay by credit card, it's cash only. So, my thought was, oh, it's too good to be true. So I went and I meditated, and I said, what happens if I go? And I picked up this really peaceful feeling. So I decided, hey, that was the universe responding to my question that I asked and the goal, the intention I placed. And her and I went, and it was absolutely incredible. I had clothes made, not as many as I wanted, but I had, I think, about 4 business suits made. I had clothes made. We rode elephants in the jungle. There was about 20 people on this trip, and it was absolutely fabulous.
Wow, that is really cool. Really cool. Can you speak a little bit more about the connection you're making with your intuition? How you're meditate on something, you'll ask a question, and you're listening to your body. Can you speak a little more about that?
Sure. One of the big things I find that intuition, there's 3 different ways, or many ways, I guess, your intuition can speak back to you. One is to listen to your own body's feedback. And let me see, I was going to say I could probably go grab my own notes on it, because when I was up in Montana in August, I was spent a week in a teepee, and I spent a lot of time in silence, and I put together this 2-page intuition, kind of like a quick sheet on feedback. So like when you ask a question, do you feel energetic or drained? Do you feel enthusiastic? Do you feel happy, or do you feel like someone just stabbed you in the back or punched you in the gut? Those are feedbacks that your intuition is giving you, and it's up to you to listen to them and pay attention. If we start to keep a journal, we will be much more aware of those feedbacks, and we all have them, but most of us aren't consciously aware of them. So step 1 is obviously you got to start becoming consciously aware. I think I shared a story at the seminar, which when I was meditating, I asked, is there like this really ridiculous story that I can share just to make a point about intuition? Because I found that I was giving away my power a lot. I would feel I knew the answer, but for some reason I didn't quite trust myself enough, and so therefore I'd call somebody up and say, what do you think? Should I do this? Should I not do this? So the example that I came up with was, think of when you got to go to the bathroom, or when you got to eat when you're hungry, or when you're thirsty and you want to get something to drink. How do you know those things? How do you know when you're hungry? The answer is you feel it. You don't get on the phone and call up your friend and say, hey, Sue, what do you think? Do you think I'm hungry? Do you think I got to eat? Do you think I should eat? And all this and that. You don't. You just know you're hungry and you eat. And that's really what intuition is about. When you pick up your own feedback, you start to gain more confidence in yourself and claiming your own power instead of giving it away. And I shared a story how this all came about, because I had a real strong gut feeling that it was time to sell some stock, and I had called a lady and said, what do you think? And she said, oh, no, it's not time. Well, instead of making $18,000, I ended up losing about $1,500. And I asked myself, what prevented me from acting on the information I received? And the answer was real clear. It was because I didn't have the confidence I needed in myself or listening to my intuition. So the next question I asked is, what is it I need to do to gain that confidence? And for me, it was really starting to keep a journal. I started to keep, in fact, I have that miracle journal, just simple things. I mean, I got so many stories where I ask a question, and sometimes within an hour, sometimes within days, it happens. And to listen to the gut. So by keeping the journal, you're going to start gaining a lot more confidence in yourself.
Great. Okay. So keep a miracle journal.
Well, and any kind of journal. I keep a dream journal. I write down all kinds of things. If something happens, I'll often write down, what my feelings were. What prevented this from happening, or just breakthroughs. I record a lot of different things. So not just miracles, I just record almost things every single day.
Okay. Another thing that I read in your As a Woman Thinketh, it was in your chapter Visions and Ideals. One of the things you said, and it spoke quite clearly to me, was to desire is to obtain and to aspire is to achieve. Dream sensational dreams, and as you dream, so shall you become. Your vision is the promise of what you will become, and your heart's desire are the prophecies of what you shall at last unveil. Can you speak a little bit more about dreams and vision and that kind of thing, and how that ties in with
what page?
abundance?
What page was that on? Do you know?
That's on page 20.
Okay, I thought I'd just kind of pull it out. I grabbed it in front of me. If we have the same page here, the paragraph starts with.
To desire is to obtain.
Okay. Well, whatever you desire, that's where your energy is. So again, going back to intuition also, your energy, what gets you excited? When you desire and when you have excitement for something, that's where your energy is. Let that energy is often what moves you towards completion of a goal. So by desiring something, that's what drives you forward to move forward and write down your to-do list. Like I think, Velma, you shared with me a big breakthrough you had with this whole process with putting together these teleconference calls. And that was a beautiful breakthrough that you had that you shared with me. And to me, those breakthroughs, it's like, how do I want to say it? It's like as soon as I finally get the lesson, I don't have to repeat it. So the universe or people will keep giving us opportunities to learn the lesson, and if we don't learn it, we get to keep repeating it. But as soon as we learn it and get that big aha and really get it on a deep level, you'll notice that those opportunities for you to repeat those lessons don't come up near as what they used to.
Yes. Actually, what I'm also noticing is when I first get a breakthrough, I'm given probably 5 or 6 or 8 opportunities to repeat it to other people. So that it sinks in, I guess.
Which is good, because we need to get it really on a cellular level. We have to get it really deep.
Great. There's one more thing that I wanted to talk to you about. I was reading through your recipes for the soul, and I absolutely enjoyed reading them. It was a very easy, quick read. It was very pleasurable to go through it. And what I noticed for myself is that recipes for the soul can pretty much be rephrased as recipes for abundance.
Oh, absolutely true.
When I was reading through it, and pretty much each recipe will definitely fit into somebody's definition of what abundance is for them.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the ones that stood out for me were recipe for appreciation, recipe for visualization, recipe for courage, recipe for intuition, and recipe for creativity, and recipe for fun.
Mm-hmm.
What I noticed from my own selection is that I ended up picking ones that coincided with my values.
Mm-hmm.
Those things that I think are important for me. I'm wondering if it would be beneficial to people to actually go through something like your recipes for the soul and pick out the ones that do stick with their values and use that as a definition for abundance, rather than like myself, I have in the past focused on financial abundance is what I defined as abundance. Do you think that would be a good idea, and do you think maybe it might make everything else fall in place when people start focusing towards their values rather than money?
Well, absolutely. I think when you do money for money's sake, the feeling of the heartfelt feeling is not there. But when you do what you love to do, the money just automatically follows. So I always encourage people absolutely to do what you love to do. It's interesting. I put together In the Kitchen of the Heart recipes for the soul. I don't know how many years ago, and I keep seeing these as postcards or little cards where each recipe could just be a card in its own. And I put it together for my son, actually. I wanted my son to have something in a nutshell where if he wanted recipe for peace or recipe for fun, that he could, quote, turn to it, and with less than 2 minutes of reading, it would bring a smile to his face, because they are really cute. They're simple, it's fun, and everything else. In fact, I pulled it out today to look at it, because I haven't looked at it for a while, and they're just so simple. And I think everybody everywhere could always pull out a few that they could look at just as reminders. And I think if they pull out the ones they value, it would definitely help them just in whatever area they want, just as a reminder. And actually, I'd like it renamed to, it could definitely be called Recipes for Abundance. In fact, it looks like I have that book sold to China also. It looks like I have 6 books coming out in China. I have 3 coming out this October, August, September, October, and then it looks like they're taking another 3, and another 3 or 4 of mine, and this is one that they're considering right now as we speak. And they also are renaming it, and I don't know what they are going to rename it to. They told me, and I really loved it. Because when you translate things to China, sometimes by using the words that are in America, they don't translate as well, so they have to come up with another word so it translates better.
Oh, interesting. Okay, well, that's great. Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up for the questions that I have. I know that your speech about intuition is one that really fits for me. I know I don't listen to my intuition as well as I could and should. I haven't spent as much time learning how to tell if I'm in my mind or in my intuition as clearly as I know if I'm hungry or not. Because boy, I know that would.
Well, wouldn't it be nice if it was that clear? And sometimes it is that clear. If you notice, when we get down to a real situation, well, they say mothers are really in tune with their children, which is true. I have a son, and I also have a twin sister, and when my twin sister is hurting, I can pick it up. So, and I don't know why, I don't know how to explain it. I just know that I can. Now, I know in the case of when I'm hungry, it's just so obvious. I'm real hungry. It's like when I got to go to the bathroom, it's real obvious. I know I have to go, and I wish that my intuition was as clear. Sometimes I can say that it is, because sometimes, and I know this has happened to everybody, where we've made a decision and we have that real bad pain in the gut, and what we did is we ignored it. And looking back, as if we could see that that was our warning sign for us not to move forward with that decision. Do you know what I'm saying? So I know we've been given those signs. We just, number one, weren't consciously aware of them. As when we're hungry, that's just accepted by everybody. When you're hungry, you eat. So intuition isn't as widely acceptable as eating 3 times a day.
Definitely. Okay, well, that pretty much wraps it up for my questions. Does anybody else there have a question for Cindy?
Yes, Cindy, this is Newt.
Mm-hmm.
You said something earlier while you were describing the process by which you hooked up with the person to do your clothing.
Uh-huh.
And there was a little jewel in there I want to pull out and get very clear. It sounded to me like in forming your intention around that when you were going into your meditation, that you made sure to plan to pay. You planned how you were going to pay for it. In other words, you planned to bestow abundance. You weren't just asking, gimme, gimme, gimme.
Correct. I'm a big believer in a win-win situation. So I thought, how could this be a win-win? And I thought, well, who wouldn't want an all-trip paid to go someplace really fun and have everything paid for, and in exchange, and this was her hobby. She said, oh my God, this is like a dream come true. So it was a big win-win for both of us.
Wow. How did you get to that place? Because that's a way of setting intentions that's entirely unique.
You mean, well, I think by asking the question, what do I feel the other person would want, and I knew that another person whose hobby or what their true desire was, that they would jump at the opportunity instantly. And that what was amazing is when I wrote down on the piece of paper, a friend of a friend would introduce me to someone, I don't know where that came from. And when I went back to look at my goal, I got goosebumps on that, because I didn't know. That was just like, I know Deepak Chopra talks about placing your intention and then you let the universe handle the details. So I knew that when I ask a question or when I get clear on what I want, that when the time's right, it does manifest. And the perfect person shows up who's going to benefit on their end also.
That's just really phenomenal. You also mentioned just now, so do you make it a point to regularly go back and look at your goal journal?
Well, when I was putting together the power strategies, the foundation for creating and building wealth, I went back to pull them all out because I wanted to put my exact words in the workbook so that when somebody said, well, how did you write your goals? In 1988, I was completely broke. I had psoriasis on both elbows. I had no money to put food on my table. And within 3 years, I went from living in a 900-square-foot apartment to living in a 5,000-square-foot home, from having basically, from being in debt to being financially independent. And at the time when I was completely broke, I wrote this house goal. And I wrote this goal that by July 10th, 1991 or sooner, that I'd be living in a 5,000-square-foot home, professionally decorated in a guarded community. I don't even know where on earth some of this stuff came up from. I just sat down and wrote it. Again, I was broke. I had filed the goal. Oh, and then at the bottom of the goal, I put that I'd get this house for 50 cents on the dollar. And I filed this goal, and it was in 1997 when I was moving from my 5,000-square-foot home to the house I'm in now, which I like better. It's smaller. I didn't need that big of a house anymore. And I found this goal. I got goosebumps everywhere. I just thought, oh my God, because I closed 3 weeks before the deadline on that goal. I said I'd have this house by July 10th, 1991 or sooner. I closed on the house June 21st of 91. And I bought the house for exactly 50 cents on the dollar from the government. Mm-hmm. It had been on the market for a long time. And I guess was the only offer that came along.
Beautiful.
I know. When that goal is in there, and see, to me, that alone, having a goal like that to model after is priceless.
Do you recommend that we go back periodically and look over them to do kind of a miracle accounting? I loved what you also said about keeping a miracles journal. I was curious for more details about how you go about that.
Well, whenever anything happens, like just so quickly in my life, the way I'm in this house now just happened. Well, it was 3 miracles, like with immediately that happened with this house, and it was just so fun. I say write it down, and I do go back and look at my goals because you do want to rewrite them. You may look at it. In fact, sometimes write it down and rewrite it for, however many days in a row until it feels right. The question is until it feels right, because you may write down, you want $1 billion or whatever, but do you really want to? What is it you would have? What would that bring you if you did have that? So what you're really more after is the feeling. So a lot of times I'll rewrite my goals a lot until I get to the point where, yes, I can feel it and the intensity of it, and I think that's what helps it manifest so much quicker. So do you really want what you say it is you really want? And again, the question of the week, there's so many powerful questions out there, and that I love asking. Somebody asked me, I think a month ago, how would you describe your life? And it was, wow, my life, it's about fun. I have fun everything I do. If it's not fun, I'm not interested in doing it. And so the next question is, how would you like to describe your life? So describe your life now, and then the next question is, how would you like to describe it? And then work backwards. Figure out the steps you need to take to get to where it is you want to be.
Great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I really like that. Thanks for the great questions, everyone.